the small town of Ember's Watch, a wizard was going about some errands and procuring supplies. He appeared to be in his 30s, with a neatly trimmed beard, jet black hair, and striking emerald eyes, cloaked in a vibrant red that seemed too warm for comfort. His attire was complete with black trousers and a blue and red tunic. Despite his distinct appearance, the townsfolk paid him little attention, accustomed as they were to unusual visitors. As he meandered through the marketplace, a curious sight caught his attention. A boy, no more than 9 or 10, was discreetly using magic to float fruit from a stand towards himself. The wizard was intrigued. The child's natural ability was remarkable, a rare instance of untrained magical talent. It was rare to witness a child wielding magic without formal training. Based on the child's disheveled, ragged and thin frame, it was an easy assumption to make. The wizard watched, intrigued, as the boy stealthily floated an apple to his hand and darted down an alley. Curious, the wizard cloaked himself and followed discreetly. Using his senses to track the magic, he found the boy sitting on the ground, hungrily eating the stolen apple. Realizing his continued invisibility, he dispelled the magic, startling the child, who poised to flee. But upon seeing the wizard, the boy's eyes widened in awe.
Greetings.
The wizard began with a warm smile.
I am Ulrich Everglen, a wizard, like you.
The boy's reaction was a mix of surprise and caution, his body tense as he replied in a small voice, questioning Ulrich's intentions.
What do you want?
He asked, his voice small, his body coiled like a spring. After sensing the boy's caution, he maintained his friendly demeanor and replied,
You're the first person I've seen this far east with magic, so I was curious.
Seeing the boy's skepticism, Ulrich continued,
I noticed you levitating that apple. I'm quite sensitive to magic, and that drew me to you, not the act of stealing.
Before the boy could interject, Ulrich raised his hand and added,
Not that stealing is right, of course, but as wizards, our experiences differ from others, don't they?
His smile seemed to reassure the boy.
Thank you, sir.
The boy said, relaxing slightly.
My guardians would probably sell me to pay for the crime anyway.
Ulrich's eyebrow arched inquiringly.
I live with my uncle and his wife.
The boy explained.
They're mostly busy with the farm, or spending their coin at the tavern. I'm often left to fend for myself. My father died in the White Plague when I was a baby, and my mother succumbed to the winter's fever 2 years ago.
Ulrich nodded, his expression one of understanding and empathy. The White Plague, a calamity that ravaged the continent of Prismara in the world of Malor, was a grim consequence of dark magic wielded irresponsibly. Necromancers, intoxicated by their own power and the lure of immortality, attempted to subvert the natural order. In response, Nocturna, the goddess of the afterlife, permitted their transgression, but, with a dire twist, these necromancers transformed into wights, undead beings driven by an insatiable craving for the death of all life. The White Plague, as it came to be known, left a trail of devastation. The once thriving kingdoms of Nyxphoria and Arkkenhall fell, their inhabitants swelling the ranks of the undead. It took the unified might of the 5 other kingdoms on Prismara to eventually halt the plague. This coalition was the only force capable of quelling the undead scourge. The aftermath of such dark sorcery lingered, instilling a deep-seated unease and hostility towards magic among the non-magical populace. This distrust and fear of magic tends to diminish as one travels westward across the continent. However, this is less a sign of acceptance and more a reflection of the constant threat posed by invasions from the Syring Plains. This persistent threat of invasion shapes the attitudes and priorities of the Prismara continent's inhabitants. The relentless assaults from the Syring Plains inadvertently contributes to the continent's wealth. The resources derived from the monsters of the plains is incredibly valuable. The body parts of magical creatures are a lucrative commodity. They have the potential to enrich any kingdom. These resources are coveted for their myriad of uses in crafting magical artifacts, potions, weapons, and armors. These resources contribute significantly to the wealth and prosperity of the kingdoms on the Prismara continent.
I see.
Ulrich remarked, observing the boy with a discerning gaze.
Have you had any magical training?
The boy shook his head, his voice tinged with a hint of melancholy.
My father was a fire elemental. He wrote many things in a journal, which he left with my mother. She was an alchemist and knew the importance of concealing my magic. She taught me my letters and numbers using my father's journal.
The boy explained, gradually becoming more at ease. He glanced at the ground and admitted softly,
I'm not very good with numbers.
Ulrich couldn't help but let out a hearty, bark-like laugh, causing the boy to blush and look up in embarrassment after realizing he had spoken his thoughts aloud. The boy gave Ulrich an unimpressed look as the wizard continued to chuckle. Ulrich reassured him.
That's perfectly normal. Wizards,
He said, gesturing between themselves.
we use a different kind of math. Magic and numbers are interconnected, but each number has its own significance. In fact, not being proficient in conventional math might even be an advantage for you.
This comment drew a smile from the child as well. After a brief, comfortable silence, Ulrich spoke again.
I hadn't planned on staying in town for long. I was just visiting a friend before heading back west. However, if you're interested, I could take you to the Sunfire Academy.
The boy's face fell, and his whole demeanor changed to melancholy with a hint of defeat.
How could I go there? I don't have any money, and I don't possess fire magic.
He lamented. Ulrich raised an eyebrow in surprise. While it wasn't unheard of for a fire elemental to have a child without fire magic, it was certainly uncommon. His interest in the boy's unique abilities grew. Ulrich probed further as his curiosity piqued.
I assumed you used wind magic to lift that apple. It's fairly common for fire elementals to also harness wind and lightning magic. And given that we're in the kingdom of Solara, I thought that might be your affinity. So, tell me, what is your magical affinity?
The boy continued to look down, offering only a non-committal shrug in response. This deepened Ulrich's intrigue. Here was a child, unaware of his own magical affinity, was capable of using magic to precisely control an object. Such precise control was rare in someone so young, more so for someone who hadn't even identified their primary school of magic. Ulrich's mind buzzed with possibilities and questions about this unusual child's untapped potential. Closing his eyes, Ulrich weighed his options before he made his decision.
I understand your situation.
He said gently.
Given your mother's advice to hide your magic, it's likely you never had an affinity reading when the Academy recruiters visited. But if you're interested, I can take you to Sunfire Academy. Don't worry about the cost. What many don't realize is that the Academy is supported by donations from its alumni, many of whom were orphans themselves. This doesn't include the material and financial support provided by the royal family.
As he finished, he watched as a spark of hope lit up in the boy's eyes. However, before the boy could respond, Ulrich's attention was diverted. His senses, honed from his training as a beast master, detected something alarming in the air. A beast master is capable of communicating with animals, adopting their senses, utilizing their magical affinities, and mimicking some of their abilities. A distinct scent caught his attention, and without hesitation he released an emergency magical flare into the sky. It soared upwards and burst into the form of a phoenix, the emblem of the kingdom of Solar, illuminating the sky. The world seemed to stand still as a hushed silence fell, only to be shattered by the urgent ringing of bells from the western gate. Without wasting a moment, Ulrich scooped the boy onto his shoulder and dashed towards the commotion. As they moved, they saw soldiers and adventurers heading in the same direction, while civilians scrambled away in panic and fear. Reaching the 15-foot wall, Ulrich, with a single powerful jump, landed on the parapet and peered over a gap in the wall. His eyes confirmed his fears, unveiling the source of the disturbance that had set the town into a frenzy. The sight that greeted Ulrich was a chaotic skirmish. A raiding party of goblins and kobolds was attacking civilians who had been working on the farms outside the wall. Fortunately, they were being momentarily held at bay by a mix of adventurers and town watch. Ulrich gently set the boy down on the safety of the parapet.
Stay here and wait for me.
He instructed firmly.
Goblins and kobolds might be weak individually, but with their numbers, they're a serious threat.
Without waiting for a response, he leaped off the wall, seamlessly transforming midair into an ember claw wolf. His wolf form was remarkable, a large, gold-furred wolf, emitting flames, significantly larger and more intimidating than the typical ember claws found throughout the kingdom of Solar. As an alpha ember claw, his golden fur seemed to ripple with fire. The fearsome sight quickly instilled fear in the hearts of the attacking creatures. The tide of battle began to turn as Ulrich, in his ember claw form, along with the reinforcements from the town, engaged the raiding party. As the skirmish neared its end, Ulrich reverted to his human form, believing the danger had passed. However, an unexpected attack came from behind. A goblin scout, seizing the moment, lunged at him with a dagger. Ulrich was caught off guard, unable to react in time. Just as the dagger was about to strike, the goblin was violently thrown aside, and a surge of magic filled the air. Ulrich turned to see the goblin's body pinned to the ground by a spear. He traced the trajectory back to its source and found the boy on the wall, hands outstretched, his expression one of fear and shock. Ulrich realized in that moment the boy had instinctively used powerful magic and saved his life. Ulrich's eyes met the boy's, filled with a mix of gratitude and newfound respect for the young, untrained wizard before him. As Ulrich approached the wall where the boy was standing, the boy stood with his arms crossed defensively and shouted,
"I didn't move."
Ulrich paused, and a smile broke across his face. Despite the snickers from the adventurers and soldiers nearby, his expression was one of exasperation mixed with amusement.
Thank you.
Ulrich replied sincerely.
Sneaky goblins like those often coat their weapons in poison. Your intervention might have saved me from a dire fate.
Extending his hand, he employed a gentle gust of wind magic that effortlessly lifted the boy off the wall, placing him on the ground before him. The boy, looking around somewhat dazed, said worriedly,
"I didn't see my aunt or uncle, and it's too early for them to be at the tavern."
Ulrich's expression remained steady, but internally, he felt a growing sense of unease.
Let's head to your home and make sure they're okay.
He suggested. The boy nodded and led the way, guiding Ulrich through the tree line toward his home. As they neared, Ulrich suddenly halted and turned to the boy.
Is your house that way?
He asked, pointing north. The boy confirmed with a nod.
Stay here, I think I hear something.
Ulrich said, a note of caution in his voice. The boy nodded again, and Ulrich seemed to shimmer and vanish from sight, using the camouflage magic afforded to him from his molten hide chameleon form. Ulrich stealthily approached the house. The sounds of destruction and the scampering of small feet were audible even from outside. Peeking through the remnants of what was once a door, he spotted 5 goblins ransacking the interior. With swift and precise movements, Ulrich executed a series of wind cutter spells in rapid succession. With each hand movement, a goblin fell. When all threats were dealt with, the house remained eerily silent. A thorough search led him to the unfortunate discovery of the aunt and uncle. His instincts had been correct. He was too late to save them. Employing a gentle gust of wind magic, and with somber efficiency, Ulrich moved the human and goblin bodies outside. He swiftly incinerated the goblin corpses, a necessary precaution. For the humans, he constructed a small funeral pyre. The laws enacted after the White Plague mandated burning the dead bodies of sentient beings. Returning to the boy, Ulrich relayed the somber news. The boy's reaction was unexpectedly stoic. Instead of showing visible grief, he simply nodded.
I need to return home to get a few things my mother left me,
He said, his voice steady despite the circumstances. Ulrich recognized the strength and resolve in the boy's demeanor, a reflection of the hardships he had already endured at such a young age. Ulrich was ready to provide support and protection if the boy needed. However, this is part of the harsh and unforgiving reality of life in Malor. In a world where monstrous threats were a constant, the frequent loss of life was a grim yet regular part of existence. Malor dictated that its inhabitants, especially the young, handle loss with indifference. Survival was a constant challenge, and in the brutal hierarchy of Malor, humans were far from holding the dominant position. As the boy packed his belongings into a small sack, Ulrich busied himself gathering additional wood for the funeral pyre. The boy soon emerged, dressed in a brown tunic, a black traveling cloak, brown pants, and leather boots. He approached the pyre and gave Ulrich a nod, a silent signal to proceed. Ulrich raised his hand, and a small flame leapt from his fingertips, setting the dry wood ablaze. As the bonfire was engulfed in flames, they stood in solemn silence, captivated by the fire's crackling dance, their silence offering a respectful farewell to the departed. Once the funeral rites were concluded, the boy followed Ulrich down the path back towards the town. After a moment of silence, the boy spoke.
My aunt and uncle never cared for me. They never even called me by my name. Just Monster Boy.
Ulrich turned to look at him as a pang of sadness rushed through him, followed by a dawning realization. He too had been referring to him as boy, even if only in his head. A sense of regret washed over him for this unintended slight. The boy, noticing Ulrich's reaction, offered a small knowing smirk.
My name is Finian, but I go by Finn.
Ulrich regarded Finn with a thoughtful nod.
All right, Finn, what would you like to do? I understand this is all happening very quickly, but I need to return to Aegis Gate within 10 days. My original plan didn't include a stop in Solarum, but that's where the Sunfire Academy is located.
Finn looked up at Ulrich, and with a hint of desperation in his voice asked,
Can I stay with you? You seem to know so much about magic. Couldn't I just follow you?
Ulrich couldn't help but smile at the boy's earnest request.
No, Finn, I'm afraid that wouldn't be possible. I'm headed to Aegis Gate, which is on the fringe of the Searing Plains. It functions more as a military base for the Kingdom of Solara than a city. Besides, I'll only be there for another 2 moon cycles. After my tour, I will be returning to my normal duties.
He responded, then smiled.
I'm actually a professor at Sunfire Academy.
He explained calmly. His smile conveyed a mix of pride and fondness for the academy.
Sunfire Academy is more than just a school. It's a place where young mages, like you, can learn to harness and control their abilities safely. A community of scholars, wizards, and students. A place where you can learn, not just about magic, but also about the wider world and your place in it.
He could see so many emotions playing across Finn's face. Uncertainty, curiosity, but also a subtle hint of longing.
At Sunfire, you'll have the opportunity to discover your magical affinity and learn to refine your skills. You won't be alone there, Finn, and I'll be back to see your progress once my deployment ends.
Ulrich placed a reassuring hand on Finn's shoulder, offering a gentle, encouraging squeeze.
What do you say, Finn?
Finn looked up at Ulrich with a mischievous smirk.
I always thought teachers were supposed to be all studious and smart looking. You look like the soldiers who patrol around town more than you do a professor.
Ulrich chuckled, looking down at the boy with amusement.
I get that a lot.
He admitted.
But as a beast master, I spend most of my time outdoors with animals, which doesn't lend itself to the typical scholarly appearance.
Finn's curiosity piqued. He tilted his head to the side and asked,
What do you teach?
Beast lore.
Ulrich replied.
The study of beasts.
Finn's expression turned to one of confusion.
So, you teach about monsters?
Ulrich shook his head gently.
Not exactly. I teach about beasts. There's a difference. Monsters, like the goblins and kobolds we encountered earlier, are sentient beings with malevolent intentions, while beasts are more animalistic. They can be dangerous, but they operate more on instinct than malice. They're not like sentient creatures such as werewolves, vampires, or centaurs.
Finn nodded, absorbing the information.
Moreover,
He continued,
beast lore encompasses the identification of parts from these creatures that are useful in crafting potions, armor, scrolls, and various other magical items. While I don't teach the application of these ingredients, I do educate students on how to recognize, collect, and store them properly.
As they ambled towards the town, their conversation included various aspects of beasts and their properties. The gates of the town gradually came into view. Finn paused, a determined look crossing his face. He turned to Ulrich and declared,
I want to learn magic and go to Sunfire. I don't have any family left, and whatever money we got from selling my mom's apothecary was used by my aunt and uncle on meat and seed.
Ulrich gave a nod of understanding. He placed a reassuring hand on Finn's shoulder and said,
Well, it seems we have a plan then. I need to pick up a few more supplies, and after that, we can set off for Sunfire Academy.
Finn looked up, a large, thankful smile playing on his lips as he nodded in agreement.